The savanna night usually hummed with a symphony of unseen life. The distant thrum of hooves, the chirping of crickets, the rustle of dry grass under some unseen predator. Tonight, though, the silence was a heavy blanket, suffocating and unnatural. Kaelo, in his mid-20s, lean and watchful, ran a hand through his short, curly hair, his keen eyes scanning the impenetrable darkness beyond their small campfire. Beside him, Becky, a man whose face was etched with decades of sun and sorrow, fiddled with a half-empty mug of lukewarm tea, his grizzled beard catching the flickering orange light. They were deep within their remote outpost, a flimsy barrier of canvas and mesh against the vast, indifferent wilderness. "Too quiet," Becky murmured, his voice a low rumble. "Even the crickets are holding their breath." Kaelo nodded, his grip instinctively tightening on the stock of his rifle, resting against his chair. Every instinct, honed by years of patrolling, screamed danger. This wasn't the quiet before a storm. It was the hush before something utterly unprecedented. The air itself felt thick with anticipation, pressing down on them, stealing their breath. Then, from the inky blackness, a shadow detached itself, moving with a lumbering, pained gait. It was massive, a hulking silhouette against the faint starlight, and as it drew closer, the campfire's glow caught on a dull, clotted golden mane. Kaelo froze, his hand hovering, not quite reaching for his rifle. This wasn't an ordinary encroachment. This was the Elder King, the undisputed monarch of this territory, a beast of legendary prowess. But he was broken. One massive hind leg dragged uselessly behind him, a grotesque, mangled limb that painted a dark, sticky trail on the dust. The Elder King, a creature whose roar could shatter the night, made no sound. He simply continued his agonizing crawl, not towards them with predatory intent, but to them. Kaelo's mind screamed, his training warring with a primal disbelief. A lion, wounded, approaching a human camp? It was suicide, an act of utter desperation. He was supposed to warn Becky, to raise his rifle, to scare it off. But the words died in his throat, replaced by a profound, bewildering awe. With a heavy groan that seemed to shake the very ground, the colossal lion collapsed barely 10 feet from their sputtering campfire. The impact sent a plume of dust into the air, illuminated by the firelight. Its bloodied flank heaved with each shallow breath, its massive chest rising and falling in a rhythm of pure exhaustion. Becky sat frozen, his tea mug slipping from his grasp, his eyes wide with disbelief and an ancient fear. Kaelo, too, was rooted to the spot, his own fear eclipsed by a strange magnetic pull emanating from the animal. The Elder King's eyes, catching the firelight, were not the feral amber pools Kaelo knew. There was no aggression, no hunger. Instead, they held a profound, weary plea, a raw vulnerability that twisted Kaelo's gut. It was an ancient, knowing gaze piercing through his ranger's uniform, through his years of training, straight to something deep and human. It drew him in, challenging every instinct, every lesson about the untamed wild. As the moments stretched, thick with unspoken questions, silent shapes began to materialize in the periphery. Dark, sinuous forms, low to the ground, barely visible against the night's deeper shadows. Lionesses, several of them, their eyes glinting, forming a watchful, silent circle around their fallen king and the two utterly bewildered humans. They offered no threat, no snarls, only an unnerving, shared vigil. Kaelo's gaze drifted from the lion's pleading eyes to its heaving flank, to the crimson stain blossoming against its tawny fur. It was then, amidst the matted blood and dust, that he saw it. Not a gash from a claw, nor a tear from a tusk. It was a mark, stark and impossible. A precise, almost geometric burn, a dark, cauterized circle against the golden hide, unlike any injury a wild animal could inflict or sustain. It was too clean, too deliberate, an unnatural scar, hinting at a danger far more sinister than any animal encounter. The night stretched, each minute an eternity. The dying embers of the campfire cast long, dancing shadows, painting the scene in hues of orange and black. The Elder King lay motionless, save for the shallow rise and fall of his immense chest. The ring of lionesses remained, silent sentinels whose eyes, faintly catching the light, seemed to pierce the darkness. An unyielding tension hung in the air, thick and oppressive, making every breath a conscious effort. Becky, despite the profound shock etched on his face, was a rock of protocol. Kaelo, we can't. You know the rules. No intervention. Call it in at first light. But until then, we observe. It's the law. It's for our safety, for their safety. His voice was low, strained, but resolute. He was right, of course. Everything in their training screamed against this, against any direct interaction with a wounded predator of this magnitude. But Kaelo couldn't turn away. The lion's gaze, that profound, weary plea, had seared itself into his mind. It wasn't just an animal lying broken. It was the Elder King, a symbol, a force of nature brought low by something unnatural. A deep, unsettling conviction stirred within him, a moral imperative that dwarfed the fear and defied all warnings. This was beyond protocol. This was about something else entirely, something he couldn't yet name. Taking a slow, deliberate breath, Kaelo ignored Becky's hushed protests. He reached for his canteen, the cool metal a surprising weight in his trembling hand. I can't just watch him die, Becky. Look at him. He spoke softly, not to his colleague, but almost to the still form of the lion. With agonizing slowness, he rose, then knelt, every muscle in his body taut. He placed his rifle carefully on the ground, a symbolic gesture of peace, of vulnerability. He took another step, then another, his movements measured, almost ritualistic. The lionesses shifted imperceptibly in the darkness, their eyes following his every move. Kaelo's heart hammered against his ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the overwhelming silence. He stretched out his hands, palms open, canteen uncapped, water shimmering faintly in the nascent pre-dawn light. He spoke in a low, soothing murmur, words of comfort, of reassurance, though he knew the lion couldn't understand them. It was for himself as much as for the beast. The Elder King's head stirred, slowly, painfully. His eyes, now reflecting the faint blue light of the encroaching dawn, fixed on Kaelo. It was a moment suspended in time, the rawest form of trust offered between predator and man. Kaelo's hands were shaking, but he held them steady, offering the lifeline. Then, in an unprecedented display of instinct and desperation, the massive head lowered. The rough sandpaper tongue rasped gently against Kaelo's palm, the beast drinking, not with aggression, but with a profound, almost delicate need. The sensation was surreal. The immense power of the predator, the fragile vulnerability of the offering. A wave of raw compassion washed over Kaelo, cementing his resolve. As the lion slowly, meticulously lapped the water, Kaelo carefully observed the mangled leg. The blood had begun to clot, but the wound was deep, jagged. And then he saw it. Nestled deep within the torn flesh, almost imperceptible against the darkened blood, was a tiny, unnaturally perfect metallic glint. It wasn't a splinter of bone nor a shard of rock. It was too regular, too precise, reflecting the dying firelight with an almost cold, indifferent sheen. A perfect miniature shard of something manufactured, impossibly embedded. A cold dread seeped into Kaelo's bones, chilling him far more profoundly than the pre-dawn air. His suspicion, until now a vague unease, solidified into a grim certainty. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't a territorial fight or a tumble down a rocky incline. This was deliberate, human interference. The realization hit him with the force of a physical blow, confirming his worst fears and plunging him headfirst into a conspiracy far darker and more dangerous than he could have ever imagined. The metallic glint in the Elder King's wound burned into Kaelo's mind, a stark contrast to the raw, visceral reality of the injured animal. Fear, primal and cold, snaked its way through him, but it was overshadowed by a fierce surge of compassion, a sense of moral duty that defied all reason and training. He knew with absolute certainty that he couldn't leave the Elder King to suffer. The animal had sought them out, a desperate, silent plea for help, and Kaelo was now inextricably bound to it. Becky, watching from a safe distance, his face a mask of disbelief and apprehension, spoke in a low, urgent whisper. Kaelo, don't. You'll be crossing a line you can't come back from. This is not our place. This is against everything we stand for, everything we've been taught. His words were a desperate plea, a final attempt to pull Kaelo back from the brink of a decision that would change everything. But Kaelo merely shook his head, his gaze fixed on the injured lion. He came to us, Becky. He chose to come to us. Look at him. He's dying. His voice was hoarse, thick with emotion. The glint of metal was a silent accusation, a terrifying confirmation that this was not nature's cruelty, but something far more insidious. With a deep, fortifying breath, Kaelo reached for his field kit, the worn canvas familiar under his fingers. The unzipping sound was unnaturally loud in the oppressive silence. He carefully unrolled the contents: antiseptic, gauze, a pair of sterilized tweezers, standard equipment for minor human injuries, now deployed in an act of profound defiance against protocol. He moved slowly, deliberately, his movements telegraphed to the massive beast before him. The lion, sensing his intent, let out a low, guttural growl, a rumble that vibrated through the ground and up Kaelo's kneeling legs. Its immense body tensed, muscles rippling beneath its matted fur. Kaelo froze, his hand hovering, his heart leaping into his throat. A single misstep, a sudden movement, and everything could go wrong. Yet the lion held, its eyes still fixed on Kaelo's, a silent negotiation passing between man and beast. "Easy, King," Kaelo murmured, his voice soft, almost a prayer. "Just trying to help, easy." He resumed his task, meticulously cleaning the deep gash on the lion's shoulder, the ragged edges of the wound weeping with blood and pus. The antiseptic stung, and the elder king twitched, a faint whimper escaping its throat, but it tolerated Kaelo's touch. A profound sense of intimacy settled over the scene, the fragile bond of trust forged in the crucible of desperation. The lionesses, still watchful shadows in the periphery, remained silent, their presence a haunting testament to the gravity of the moment. With extreme care, Kaelo maneuvered the sterilized tweezers into the wound, his fingers trembling slightly. He felt the resistance of tissue, then the distinct, sharp click as the tweezers closed around the object. He pulled, slowly, gently, and a tiny, almost impossibly small shard emerged. He held it up to the faint glow of the dying coals on his palm. It was metallic, reflecting the deep reds and oranges with a cold, almost alien luminescence. The edges were impossibly clean, machine-tooled, not broken by force but precisely cut. It was a fragment of advanced manufactured material, unlike anything Kaelo had ever seen in the wild. Not a bullet, not a common snare, but something far more sophisticated, a piece of technology. This chilling discovery solidified his worst fears. This wasn't just poaching. This was calculated, targeted. The Elder King's injuries were no accident. They were the result of a deliberate act, a dark conspiracy unfolding in the heart of their sanctuary. A line had been crossed not just by the perpetrators, but by Kaelo himself. By treating the lion, by extracting the evidence, he had committed himself, body and soul, to uncovering the truth. There was no turning back now. This was a point of no return. As the faintest streaks of orange and rose began to paint the eastern sky, signaling the approach of dawn, more figures materialized from the deep shadows. Not just the initial watchful lionesses, but subadults, their sleek bodies low to the ground, their eyes reflecting the burgeoning light. The entire pride, it seemed, had emerged, not to attack, not to claim their territory, but to complete the silent vigil around their fallen king and the two utterly bewildered humans. The sight was breathtaking, an unprecedented tableau of primal trust and communal grief. Kaelo, still kneeling beside the Elder King, felt the unspoken bond deepen with each passing moment. The raw fear he'd initially felt had subsided, replaced by a profound sense of responsibility, a solemn understanding that transcended species. He had chosen, he had intervened, and in doing so he had invited a commitment that now coursed through his veins, strong and unyielding. He reached into his pocket, his fingers closing around the tiny metallic shard he had extracted. Cupping it in his palm, he angled it to catch the growing light, examining it closely, secretly. It was impossibly small, yet its intricate design spoke volumes. This was no crude bullet fragment, no haphazard piece of shrapnel from a poacher's snare. Its edges were too precise, its surface too smooth, almost polished. There were minute etchings, like microscopic circuitry, that suggested sophisticated, potentially experimental technology. This wasn't just a hunt, it was an operation, employing tools far beyond the reach of common poachers. Becky's hushed words from earlier echoed in Kaelo's mind, heavy with the weight of tradition and order. This isn't the way of the world. But Kaelo knew with a chilling certainty that the world had already changed. The impossible arrival of the Elder King, the unnatural wound, the technological fragment, all pointed to a new, darker reality, a breach in the natural order orchestrated by human hands. Carefully, Kaelo took out an antibiotic from his kit. He had no way of delivering it intramuscularly without proper tools and risk, so he prepared a crushed dose mixed with water, hoping the Elder King would accept it orally. He held the solution to the lion's muzzle, and after a moment of hesitation, the great beast dipped its head, slowly, painfully, and swallowed. As Kaelo administered the makeshift medicine, his eyes met the Elder King's. The lion's golden gaze was steady, unblinking, reflecting not just weariness, but a deep, ancient intelligence. In that prolonged stare, Kaelo felt a profound recognition pass between them, an affirmation of the unprecedented choice he had made. It was a silent pact, forged in the liminal space between human and wild, between duty and compassion. The lion understood. It was asking for more than just survival. It was asking for justice. That silent exchange solidified Kylo's resolve. This was no longer just about saving an animal. It was about exposing the human evil behind the Elder King's suffering, a malevolence that threatened not just this pride, but the very sanctity of the wild they were sworn to protect. He had crossed the line. There was no going back. The dawn, now bleeding full light across the savanna, illuminated a path forward, fraught with danger, but undeniably clear. He would uncover the truth, no matter the cost. If you're gripped by the impossible bond forming between man and beast, and the chilling hints of a conspiracy threatening the wild, then you won't want to miss what happens next. The stakes are about to get terrifyingly real, and the danger immediate. Make sure you like this video, share it with anyone who loves a good mystery, and subscribe to stay tuned as we uncover the dark truth behind the Elder King's suffering. Believe me, you don't want to miss the next shocking turn of events. The fragile peace of the morning, which had settled over the savanna with the rising sun, shattered without warning. A cacophony of shrill, hysterical cackles pierced the air, growing louder, closer. Hyenas. Not just a few, but a significant pack, their distinctive, hunched silhouettes appearing on the horizon, moving with a frenzied, unnatural speed. Kaelo's heart pounded against his ribs. This was too aggressive, too bold, even for hyenas emboldened by the scent of blood. Then it clicked. The faint, unusual scent he'd noticed hours ago, a subtle chemical tang beneath the coppery smell of blood. The biomarkers. The metallic shard. He suddenly realized this sophisticated device, whatever its purpose, might have been designed to do more than just injure. It might have been emitting something, a frequency or a chemical signal, designed to attract scavengers, to ensure the Elder King's demise was swift and thorough, perhaps to eliminate evidence. The hyenas weren't just reacting to blood, they were being actively drawn in, almost herded towards the camp. Kaelo instinctively grabbed his rifle, his face a mask of fierce resolve, a mix of primal fear and righteous anger. He stood defensively near the dying embers, ready to protect his outpost, and strangely, the pride. But before he could even raise his weapon, an incredible, awe-inspiring sight unfolded before him. The Elder King, weakened, bandaged, and with a leg clearly broken, slowly, agonizingly began to rise. Every muscle in his massive frame trembled with effort, but he pulled himself up, his eyes blazing with a primal fury. He let out a fractured, guttural roar, a sound that, despite its pain, still carried the immense power of his kingly authority. It was a roar of defiance, of warning, resonating deep within Kaelo's chest. And then the pride moved, not with hesitation, but with a sudden, coordinated surge of raw power. Lionesses, previously silent and watchful, launched themselves forward, a wave of tawny fur and snarling teeth. Dust exploded around their powerful paws as they lunged toward the encroaching hyenas. The chaos was visceral. The clash of bodies, the snarls, the desperate cackles turning to panicked yelps. The lionesses, defending not just their injured king, but also impossibly the camp and the humans within it, drove the hyenas back with relentless ferocity. The collective defense, a unified front of predator and man against an external threat, cemented Kaelo's conviction. This was no longer just about conservation or protocol. This was about survival, about confronting a direct human threat that sought to destabilize the very fabric of the wild. The bond was undeniable, the stakes impossibly high. With the hyenas scattering into the distance, their cackles fading, Kaelo turned to Beiki, his hands still clenched around the metallic shard. "Look," he urged. I urged, thrusting it into Bakey's palm. "This is what I pulled from his leg. It's not natural. This isn't from a poacher's rusty trap. This is something else." Bakey's weathered fingers closed around the tiny object. His brow furrowed as he examined it in the harsh, dramatic light of late afternoon. His eyes, usually so wary and guarded, widened with a dawning horror. "Impossible," he breathed, his voice barely a whisper. This, this is not of the bush. This is man-made, but unlike anything I've ever seen. Advanced." The confirmation spoken by Bakey solidified their decision. The initial call to headquarters about a wounded lion now seemed trivial, almost a betrayal. They couldn't wait for swim. They had to act. The hyenas, drawn by whatever signal this device emitted, provided a terrifying but crucial lead. "They'll lead us," Kaelo stated, his voice firm, pointing in the direction the hyenas had fled. "They'll lead us to whoever did this, to the source of this hidden danger." The human threat had to be directly confronted, and they would follow the bloody, invisible trail to uncover it. The savanna was awash in the soft, golden light of the new dawn, painting the tall grasses and acacia trees in hues of amber and bronze. The air, crisp and fresh after the night's tension, carried the distant calls of waking birds. Kaelo stood, a profound stillness within him, watching the Elder King. The majestic beast, still bearing the visible scars of its ordeal and the fresh bandage on its leg, slowly, painstakingly lowered its massive head. It was a majestic, agonizing bow, a gesture unprecedented, a silent act of profound gratitude directed squarely at Kaelo. Kaelo felt a wave of awe wash over him, a humility so deep it brought a lump to his throat. This wasn't just an animal acknowledging aid, it was a king, acknowledging a bond, an unspoken pact forged in the crucible of desperation. He could only nod, his own eyes holding a depth of understanding and solemn promise. Then, as if on cue, the entire pride, sprawled in a wide circle around their sovereign, let out a unified roar. It wasn't a roar of aggression, but a powerful, resonant chorus of survival, kinship, and defiance. It vibrated through Kaelo's chest, a primal symphony that spoke of ancient strength and enduring spirit. The sound echoed across the vast plains, a declaration to the rising sun. Having delivered their message, having affirmed their silent bond, the pride began to move. The Elder King, with a visible limp but renewed purpose, turned slowly. One by one, the lionesses and subadults fell into formation around him. Their powerful forms melted into the tall grass, becoming fluid shadows against the golden light, receding into the horizon. Soon they were gone, leaving only the imprint of their presence on the awakened savanna and an indelible mark on Kaelo's soul. Kaelo stood for a long moment, transformed. Beside him, Becky, his face etched with a mixture of disbelief and grim acceptance, placed a hand on his shoulder. "They trust you, Kaelo," he murmured, his voice heavy. "We are now linked to this, aren't we?" Kaelo simply nodded, his eyes keen and utterly determined. "We are. We have an oath to keep." The metallic shard, still carefully tucked into his pocket, felt like a burning coal, a constant reminder of the depravity they had glimpsed. This wasn't just about saving an animal. It was about exposing a truth that threatened the very essence of the wild. Without another word, they prepared. Following the subtle trails of disturbed grass where the hyenas had scattered, guided by the almost imperceptible bioresidue, Kaelo's keen senses now picked up a faint synthetic scent mixed with the earthy tang of the savanna. They embarked on their perilous journey. The sun climbed higher, casting long, stark shadows as they moved deeper into uncharted territory, their rifles held ready, their senses alert. Hours later, the landscape subtly shifted. The wildness gave way to a calculated intrusion. Hidden among a cluster of dense copias, camouflaged with unnerving precision, they discovered it, a sophisticated outpost. This was no crude poacher's den. Steel panels shimmered beneath strategically placed netting, hinting at a modern, advanced structure. A low hum vibrated in the air, barely audible but unmistakably artificial. They approached with extreme caution, Kaelo's heart pounding a frantic rhythm against his ribs. Peeking through a cleverly concealed vent, the truth unfurled before them, chilling them to the bone. Inside, bathed in the sterile glow of fluorescent lights, was an illegal research facility. Advanced computer equipment lined tables, intricate machinery hummed, and beyond a glass partition, Kaelo saw them, animals. Not just local species, but creatures that looked altered. A baboon with strangely distended limbs, a cheetah with unnatural muscle definition, their eyes holding a distant, vacant look. This wasn't conservation. This was a larger, far more chilling conspiracy: genetically altered animal testing, bioweaponry research. The Elder King's trust had not only saved his life, but had unveiled a profound human depravity, a secret war being waged against nature itself. Kaelo and Becky stood at the precipice of a devastating truth, no longer just rangers protecting wildlife, but protectors of a secret that could shatter the world. They had found the source of the hidden danger, and now they knew they had to expose it, no matter the. The truth, stark and horrifying, lay before them. The gentle rustle of the savanna outside the hidden facility mocked the sterile, unnatural environment within. Kaelo's mind raced, piecing together the Elder King's impossible arrival, the precise wound, the advanced metallic shard, and the inexplicable attraction of the hyenas. It wasn't just a corporate cover-up. It was a perversion of science, a dangerous game played with the very essence of life. These weren't just animals, they were subjects, creations, potentially lethal mistakes in the making. Becky's face, usually so composed, was now pale, reflecting Kaelo's own revulsion. They had stumbled into a nightmare, a clandestine operation that threatened to unleash untold chaos upon the natural world, and perhaps beyond. The weight of this discovery was immense, almost crushing. They were just two rangers, far from civilization, up against an enemy with advanced technology and, likely, powerful connections. Yet, looking back at the majestic, limping figure of the Elder King in his mind's eye, Kaelo knew there was no turning back. The unspoken oath resonated, clear and unyielding. They had to expose this. They had to fight. The future of the wild, and perhaps humanity itself, depended on it.